Okay, so you broke a string. If you were actually in the room, you probably heard a pretty loud sound. It may have startled you as the harp. Actually, it doesn't hurt the harp at all. You want to know why it broke and what can you do about it. For the most part, strings are just going to break occasionally. There's no particular reason in most cases, but there's things that you can do about taking care of it. It's unlikely that what you did caused the string to break. There's two things that can cause a string to break that you could cause, and that is if you are plucking a one string, tuning one string here, and you're plucking a different string. So what happens if you tune a string and nothing changes on your meter? Stop and take a look and see whether you're on the right string there. The other thing, it is possible to be trying to tune a string too high. So you're plucking it and you're trying to go for a note, the wrong string. A string should be able to tune up 2 or 3 notes higher than it's intended for and not break. But it can break if you're trying to tighten it too tight. If you're tightening a string and it stops changing, the meter stops changing, that means that you're very, very close to it breaking. That's a good sign of that. For the most part, strings are just going to break they tend to break in the spring and the fall, although that's not consistent. Seems like when the weather changes, they'll break. If we get into strings that break for various causes, it's hard to tell. Sometimes the material itself may not be good. The strings that we use are made out of a tempered hard nylon. Here's a hank of string that as we buy it. This string is designed for the bristle brush industry. These strings are made to make into brushes. They're not particularly aimed at harps at all. We sort of tag along on that industry. So they can have flaws. Several years ago we had some 50,000 string that was bad, but we haven't seen that for quite a while. But you can also, if you can feel the string, sometimes you can feel that it isn't uniform in thickness. And that usually doesn't cause it to break, but it does cause it to not sound as good as it should. So the strings can break from material. They can also, if it's an older string, if it's been on for a long time, they can start to get brittle and occasionally break. For the most part, older harp strings will sound bad a long time before they start to be breaking. I've had customers that say, I've had strings on my harps for 25 years and never broke any. We recommend that you replace the strings within every 5 years. That keeps them sounding good, and you also don't have as much problem with breaking. Strings can break if it's a new harp. Strings can break for a variety of reasons. One common cause is the string, a wrap string. If you'll notice these wrap strings, you can come in here close. These wrap strings have a solid core and a wrapping on them. Well, when this wrapping comes up over the bridge pin, occasionally it can get hung up on here. And if that happens, you can tighten this up too much and we'll have a string breakage. I think also the process of putting the wrap on and gluing it can make a string break. Wrap strings tend to break more often than others, and that's probably because they're more expensive. So if you get into the smoother strings, they seldom break. The one issue that you need to look at is finding out whether the string actually broke. That's not as silly a question as you think, because there are two things that can happen. One is that the string, the short, light, small strings have a knot with a stick in them. If this stick falls out in the process somewhere, that string can actually pull through the eyelet, and you'll actually have a string that looks like it's broken, but really the knot is still there. And in that case, it's a matter of just taking the string off and putting it back on again. The other thing that can happen is that the string is so slippery that it just, as you tighten it, it can just pull itself loose. And you'll see that if the string is too long, and you can see that it was on here. In that case, the string isn't actually broken, but it has to be reinstalled. A lot of times if they've been cut off, it's really hard to get that to reinstall it. You'll end up having to put a new string on anyway. So that can happen. But if the string really did break, then there's several things that can be a problem with that. Besides having a string that wears out, you can also have a situation during the installation process. When we install these sharpening levers, we're using some really sharp tools really close to the strings. And occasionally, if we're using a little tap, and you can see that sharp tool there, or a drill bit to drill a hole, we can actually put a tiny nick on that string. If that happens, it's impossible to see, but that string will break in a fairly short time. In that case, the repair is just to put on a new string, and the new string won't have any problems, so it should hold up just fine. We always send a complete set, a new set of strings with each Stoney and harp, so you've got covered if we have any issues with that. If you decide that it's time to replace all the strings on the harp, I like to replace the strings one or two at a time, because what I want to do is keep the load on the harp. I don't like to unload a harp if I can help it. So I don't take all the strings off and then start over again replacing. I'll replace them one or two at a time. The only issue that a lot of people tend to like to refinish a harp, and in that case you could refinish it before you take the strings off. If you do have to adjust sharpening levers, I like to do that before I put the new strings on too, because it takes a while for the new strings to settle in, and at that point it's hard to do any adjusting on the sharpening levers at that point. So we would take one string off at a time. If it's a zither pin harp like this, we have to unscrew it as many times as it was turned in. You may well see a situation where one zither pin is really deep and another one doesn't line up with the other ones. That's a situation where that string at some time in the past is broken, and that replaced string was screwed deeper and deeper into the wood. At this point, when you're going to replace all the strings, we would fix that. If you see that situation on a harp and you're not going to replace the strings, I wouldn't bother even changing it at that point. But when you replace all the strings, I would back them out so they're all level, and then try to get the same number of wraps on each one as you bring it up to pitch. So we'll take one at a time and replace that string. If you replace a string, one of the issues is to get enough wraps around the pin. If you have a string and it breaks, and you put on a new string and it breaks right away, the issue is that you didn't leave enough slack in it. So when you put on a new string, you put it through the hole, pull it back, give it some slack, 3 or 4 string spacing here, and then start to wrap it up. And you'll get enough wraps around here so that the friction of the string wrapping around the pin is what holds it, rather than the string going through the hole actually holding against the tension. And if you have a situation where you put a new spring on and it breaks right away, that's almost always the issue with not putting enough wraps on the string. Okay, well, what, have we got everything covered? I think that's pretty much everything that I had on my list here.
Why don't you intro the next section? Say now we're going to take a look at actual string breaking and replacing.
Okay. Now we'll take an example here where we're going to actually show you how a string can be replaced and how to tie the knot. The issue that most people ask me is how to tie a knot on the string, and we're going to demonstrate that for you. One of the most common problems you have is a broken string. Strings break by themselves, and also strings break like that. Anyway, Mark, it's up to you now. Would you show us how to replace this particular string that just accidentally broke here.
Accidentally broke.
Accidentally broke, yes.
Do we know what the diameter is?
But we know who's at fault. The easiest way is to poke it through the front, because then you don't have to tie a knot and try to poke its work on the inside of the harp. So you pokes it through from the front. Now the issue is to tie the knot. And this is where we want to show you exactly what goes on. So, okay, Mark, would you show us how we tie the harp knot? Put a little kink in there. See, like that. Now we're bringing it around and through the loop that he just made. And we're going to put in a little toggle here. We call it a stick. Now we've got the first knot tied. Now he's going to tie a second loop on there. There. And now this won't pull through when you tighten it up. Another problem that I frequently get asked about is how in the world can you get that bottom string poked all the way in back here with your hands and get that bottom string to come in. And I'm going to show you a little trick that makes that a lot easier to do. You take another string from one of the string packs that you have and poke it through from the outside. And then you can reach in and pull this string out. Okay, now you've got a string here. So you take this string that you're trying to put in there, you put it right here like that, take a tiny bit of Scotch tape and tape it together like that, like that. Then take some dental floss and start to wrap the dental floss around it. And then, very carefully, pull that string through there, and you've done it. Now you've got your string. See how easy that was? Okay, now we've got the new string here. So we need to, first thing we need to do, these pins screw in to the wood. If you see, there's very, very fine threads on them. So we lost this string, so now we have to unscrew this screw, this tuning pin as many turns as were originally on there. Now you'll notice that this pin is considerably higher than the surrounding pins. And so when we put the string on there and tighten it up, it will be back to the original location. This is something that's very important to look for in your harp. If you already have pins that are, certain ones are noticeably deeper than others, that was because they were, string was replaced, but it wasn't backed off before it was replaced. Now this string will take anywhere from several days to a week before it will actually stay well in tune. But at this point, the string should be working and functional. There it is, and that wasn't all that hard, was it?